We are now on resolution number 2 in attempting to sort of silence, I guess, critics of, and never mind Zionism for a moment. This is a blatant attempt to silence critics of an assault on a civilian population that we really don't have an analog to in history. It is the case that we've had civilians in Yemen, let's say, for instance, tens of thousands of civilians killed. We have not seen, in recent memory, but we have not seen the kind of leveling by bombs in this shorter period of time, maybe ever.
It's unprecedented. In
terms of even you go back to World War II, you did not see the demolition of standing cities and buildings and the dispossession of people take place this quickly.
Yeah. The Financial Times had a piece today looking at specifically damage to urban areas and comparing it to World War II, to Sam's point. And northern Gaza, around, they estimate 68% of buildings have been damaged severely during the conflict. And that is similar. And we should say
conventional weapons, obviously.
Yes, and that's similar
Nagasaki,
to
Hiroshima,
right.
Different ball game.
That's similar to the multi-year-long destruction in places like Dresden, and in fact, it's higher in terms of percentage.
But this is a flagrant attempt to silence people who are protesting against that attack on civilians, and then also, of course, it's a flagrant attempt to silence people who are critical of the ethno-nationalist state and form of government that exists in Israel. Both those things. We have seen this in the past where people engaging in a boycott, states around the country have said you cannot get hired by the state. If you are a speech therapist in Texas trying to provide services to an elementary school, help some kid who maybe has a lisp or stutters or whatever it is, and you've ever participated in a boycott or supported the boycott of Israel based upon its occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, you can be denied that contract on those grounds. That exists in, I don't know how many states it is in this country. I think it's at least maybe a dozen at this point. Maybe half a dozen. And this is like that. And Jews know that you can be not anti-Semitic, but against the idea of a ethno-national state for a myriad of reasons, not the least of which it doesn't seem to have worked in terms of protecting Jews.
Yeah.
Here is Jerrold Nadler from the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which it gets about as it's pretty Jewy there if you've never been. And here's Jerrold Nadler rising to speak against this resolution that all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
More problematically, the resolution suggests that all anti-Zionism, it states that all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. That is either intellectually disingenuous or just factually wrong. And it unfairly implicates many of my Orthodox former constituents in Brooklyn, many of whose families rose from the ashes of the Holocaust. While most anti-Semitism is indeed anti-Semitic, the authors, if they were at all familiar with Jewish history and culture, should know about Jewish anti-Zionism that was and is expressly not anti-Semitic. This resolution ignores the fact that even today, certain Orthodox Hasidic Jewish communities, the Satmar in New York and others, as well as adherents of the pre-Jewish state pre-state Jewish labor movement have held views that are at odds with the modern Zionist conception. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, quote, the anti-Zionist worldview of the ultra-Orthodox groups, like the Satmar Hasidim, perceives Zionism and the establishment of the State of Israel as an anti-Messianic act. That is to say that these ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jews believe that only the Messiah can bring about the true Israel. And I assure you, the Satmar Hasidic Jews are certainly not anti-Semitic. I should also note that there are those who try to smear even progressive pro-Israel supporters with the inappropriate label of Israel hater or anti-Zionist. Under this resolution, those who love Israel deeply but criticize some of its policy approaches could be considered anti-Zionist. That could make every Democratic Jewish member of this body, because they all criticize the recent Israeli judicial reform package, de facto anti-Semites. Might that be the author's intention?
Well, I would say yes, because it was brought by a Republican House.
Indeed. And I should correct myself. I'm being corrected. It was about 35 or 36 states in the country that now can discriminate against you in hiring if you've been supportive of boycotting. That's seems contrary to the First Amendment, frankly.
Yes.
I don't even know how that hasn't been tested, frankly.
I mean, it's been one of the, refrains every time a free speech issue comes up the entire time I've been doing this professionally is like, hey, where do you stand on all these bills going through, I don't know if it's ALEC supporting it, but they seem to be very similar going through legislatures across the country. No, let's talk about moderation.
I think part of why it hasn't been challenged is because, seemingly what gets to the Supreme Court these days are well-funded right-wing groups that are putting their pet projects to the fore. I saw someone tweet who is a Jewish man essentially saying the House just declared that basically a House of mostly white Christians just passed a resolution categorizing me as an unacceptable kind of Jew. And I feel like that really sums it up here, because as we said on the program and have been recently, the right-wing Christian Zionist project is working overtime right now to redefine anti-Semitism as not hatred of Jews, but of people who are in opposition to white Western power as it exerts itself through the top recipient of our military aid in the Middle East, and that is the Israeli government. And that is a very dangerous proposition because it both puts a target on people's backs who are critics of Israel, as we mentioned, but also dilutes notions of anti-Semitism in the long run and ties them to a foreign country where that is not what the lived experience of people who experience anti-Semitism in this country, are. It's not the immediate reality, I would say, or it's not going to do anything to alleviate those experiences. It'll only exacerbate it.
I would also say that, there was a time in this country where the idea that you had to have loyalty to Israel, if you were Jewish, was considered an anti-Semitic slur. Yeah. The idea of dual loyalty was considered an anti-Semitic slur. Apparently, we put in a little moratorium on that. I should say those BDS laws apparently went up or were they've been challenged. I know, at least in Texas. In Texas, they were upheld. The Supreme Court has refused to at this point review those laws. So you're right about that.